Human noses are good for sniffing, but they're nothing compared to those of our furry friends. Dogs, for example, have 350 million scent receptors compared to us who only have 5 million, which is why they're now being recruited to help detect COVID-19 in humans.
We believe that COVID-19 does have a particular odour. Dogs can be trained to learn the smell of that odour, and if so, we could have a really impactful way of tackling this pandemic.
Dogs have already been trained to successfully detect different types of cancer, Parkinson's, and even the blood sugar level in people with diabetes.
When dogs can detect a disease, they can normally do it very, very well with very high accuracy. For malaria, they can do it above the World Health Organization cutoff for diagnostics.
So how can dogs detect COVID-19 through smell?
When you have an infection, there are lots of things that happen inside the body. The body's going through, there's the immune system and all sort of stresses on the body as well. And that in turn changes the odour that comes from our body, sometimes through our breath and through our skin. It's not the virus itself that is creating the odour, but actually your body's reaction to the virus being there.
How easy is it to train a dog to detect COVID? These medically trained dogs, some of whom originally came from rescue homes, take about 8 weeks to learn to identify a new odour.
What it's a bit like doing, it's a bit like becoming a wine taster, if you like, when a very sophisticated wine taster can tell the grape of a region. And what they're doing is learning the odour that is associated with a particular disease or condition and learning to ignore all other odours.
In a controlled training room, the dogs are presented with samples from people who have the disease and those who are healthy. They're then encouraged to sniff each sample carefully.
If the odour they've been trained to find isn't there, they go past it. But if the odour is there, in this case COVID-19, then the dog stops and sits. A very, very clear, obvious behaviour change.
Will the animals be at risk of catching the virus? COVID-19 is known to infect cats and even lions and tigers, but the research team are putting the dog's welfare first.
There is very little to no evidence that dogs become sick themselves or that they pass this on to other dogs or to other people. But we are taking it very seriously. They can detect the samples from a distance and they're sniffing the air, so they're not contacting it. And working in practice, a dog wouldn't have to be in contact with anybody or any sample.
It's not just researchers in the UK. Around the world, teams in Australia, Spain, Germany, Brazil and Lebanon are training canines to sniff out COVID-19. In Finland and Dubai, they're even trialling dogs sniffing out the virus in airports. But is it just dogs in the animal kingdom who could sniff out COVID?
We know for a fact that rats are capable of sniffing out diseases.
Cindy trains African giant pouched rats to save lives by detecting landmines, but they also have been trained to detect diseases like tuberculosis.
Our rats have found over 18,000 patients that otherwise had been missed by traditional diagnostics.
Could rats sniff out COVID-19?
From our experience with the rats, anything that has a unique odor profile, they can be trained to detect. It takes a minimum of 3 months to train the rats to find any odor target, particularly with diseases, because they are so complex. So it's really important that you have thousands of samples in order to get an accurate disease detection animal.
And samples are what the dog sniffing team in the UK are asking the public to donate.
What we need are samples, particularly from people who've tested positive recently. So anyone who's had a test, received a positive result in the last couple of days, if they can get in touch with us, we will send them a pack through the post which will contain a mask, a pair of socks and a t-shirt which we'll ask them to wear for a few hours. There's a prepaid envelope in there to post it back to us. And it's really as simple as that.
If the trial is successful, the dogs could offer a non-invasive and rapid method of virus detection, much quicker than sending off samples to labs.
Our initial results indicate something really promising. But the beauty of this is that each individual dog could screen up to 250 people per hour.
A report has found that there is high evidence that sweat odour of COVID-positive people was different to that of those who did not have the virus. So if the dogs are able to detect the difference, then COVID-sniffing dogs could become a familiar sight in airports and train stations.